What if you fell asleep tonight and woke up 300 years in the future? Everyone you know is gone, the world has completely transformed, but you haven't aged a day.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This isn't science fiction. This is the real story of Ashab al-Kahf, the people of the cave preserved in the Quran as one of the most powerful demonstrations of Allah's mercy and power.
Imagine a sleep that lasted centuries, yet felt like a single night. We recite Surah Al-Kahf every Friday, but beyond the recitation, what if this miraculous story holds urgent lessons for faith for our lives today?
That's such an important question. You know, this story wasn't just revealed randomly. There's a whole backstory to why Allah revealed it. And it connects directly to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the challenges he was facing.
Okay, so before we get into the cave, the sleep, the miraculous awakening, we need to talk about why this story was revealed in the first place, because that context, it changes everything.
Absolutely. Let me take you back to Mecca. During the early days of the Prophet's mission, the leaders of the Quraysh were desperate to disprove the Prophet's message. They thought, if he's really a prophet receiving revelation from Allah, he should know stories from the past that no one here has heard of. So they went to the Jewish scholars in Medina who were known for their knowledge of previous scriptures and asked for the ultimate test.
A pop quiz from the heavens.
Exactly. The Jewish scholars gave them 3 questions. One was about a group of young men in ancient times who disappeared under miraculous circumstances. Another was about a great traveler who reached the ends of the earth. And the third was about the true nature of the soul.
And the story of the people of the cave was the answer to the first one.
Precisely. The Quraysh came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with these questions, saying, if you can answer these, then you are truly a prophet of Allah. And the pressure was on. The Prophet knew that the revelation, if it were to come, would be from Allah. So he said he would tell them the answers, but then for 15 days, no revelation came.
15 days? That must have been agonizing. The mockery from the Quraysh would have been intense.
It was. They began to taunt him, saying, "Where is the promised revelation?" His heart was heavy. But this delay itself was a lesson in divine wisdom. It taught the believers patience and showed that revelation is entirely in the hands of Allah, not on human demand. And then, after this period of waiting, Surah Al-Kahf was revealed, answering their questions in the most profound way imaginable.
And it answered the question about the young men.
In stunning detail. But there's a beautiful, subtle lesson embedded in the very first verses of the story. When Allah narrates it, He says, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ نَبَأَهُمْ بِالْحَقِّ إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ وَزِدْنَاهُمْ هُدًى. We relate to you, O Muhammad, their story in truth. Indeed, they were youths who believed in their Lord, and we increased them in guidance.
So it starts by establishing their identity, not as kings or warriors, but as youths who had faith. That's so empowering for young people listening today.
Absolutely. And there's another crucial moment. The Quran mentions that they stayed in the cave for 300 years and then add 9 more.
I've always wondered about that. Why the specific 300 years and add 9?
This is a beautiful nugget of precision. It reflects the difference between the solar and lunar calendars. 300 solar years is roughly equivalent to 309 lunar years. The Quran, in its infinite wisdom, uses the precise measurement. But more importantly, the story's revelation was a definitive victory for the Prophet. It wasn't just a story, it was proof of his prophethood and a divine response to the disbelievers' challenge.
So this isn't just a historical account. It's a moment of divine support, a miracle of knowledge given to the prophet to silence his critics.
That's the core of it. And it reminds us that when we are tested, our help comes from Allah in ways we can't always predict. The Quraysh thought they had the ultimate test, but Allah provided the ultimate answer, one we still benefit from over 1,400 years later.
Now that we know why this story was revealed, I think we're ready to meet these remarkable young men. Who were they? And what was the world they lived in that forced them into a cave?
Let's journey back centuries before the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to a time of a different empire and a different tyranny, where in the region of the Roman Empire, a few centuries after the Prophet Isa, the empire was vast, powerful, and at this time it was ruled by a king known as Decius or Dacianus, a man who claimed divinity for himself.
Claiming divinity? So the political and religious pressure was immense.
Absolutely. It wasn't just a difference of opinion, it was state-mandated idolatry. Everyone was forced to publicly proclaim their belief in the king as a god and to worship idols. If you refused, the punishment was severe, torture or execution. This was the ultimate test of faith.
A test that our young men faced head-on. Who were they? And what was the world they lived in that forced them into a cave?
They were noble youths from affluent and influential families in the city. They weren't hidden away, they were right in the center of society. And they had been raised as believers in the pure monotheistic teachings of the Prophet Isa, the belief in one God.
So their faith was in direct opposition to the king's decree.
It was, and imagine the social pressure, their families, their friends, their positions in society, all of it was at stake. But their hearts were filled with a certainty that transcended all of that. They knew the truth, and they could not compromise it, even superficially.
That's a powerful moment of choice we can all relate to, isn't it? Maybe not facing death, but facing social ridicule or pressure at work to compromise a little on our principles.
100%. That's the first timeless lesson here. Their story begins not in the cave, but in their hearts, with the conscious, courageous decision to uphold Tawheed, the oneness of God, against the prevailing tide. They saw the corruption around them and made a sincere dua to Allah for guidance.
And how did they navigate that? They couldn't just openly rebel.
Initially, they tried to reason with the people, calling them back to the worship of the one God. But when it became clear that this was too dangerous and that the people were obstinate, they made a critical decision. They understood that to preserve their faith, they had to physically remove themselves from that environment of fitna.
They chose exile over compromise.
Exactly. This is a profound Islamic principle, hijrah, or migration for the sake of Allah. When your faith is in danger and you cannot practice it openly, it is permissible, even praiseworthy, to leave that place. So, under the cover of night, they slipped away from the city, heading towards the mountains.
That must have been terrifying, leaving everything behind, family, comfort, safety, for the unknown.
It was the ultimate leap of faith. They had no detailed plan, only their trust in Allah. As they fled, they encountered a shepherd who, seeing their faith and courage, was moved by their conviction and asked to join them on their path.
And they accepted him?
They did, and with him came a quiet, loyal companion, his dog. The Quran doesn't tell us much about the dog's story, yet it gives us a remarkable image. And their dog stretched his forelegs at the entrance. Some scholars, like Ibn Abbas, mentioned that his name was Qitmir.
So even the dog became part of their story.
Yes, it's a subtle but profound lesson that loyalty, even from one of Allah's simplest creatures, is not lost in his sight. By remaining close to the righteous, this animal was granted a place of honor in the Quran itself. It reminds us that companionship for the sake of faith, however small or humble, can be touched by divine mercy.
That's incredible. Even the simplest act of loyalty found its way into divine remembrance.
Exactly. Many scholars saw in Qatmir's presence a reminder of how loyalty and sincerity are honored by Allah, even from the most humble of his creatures.
So our group is complete. A handful of faithful youths, a shepherd who joined them, and their loyal dog Qatmir. They're fleeing for their lives with faith as their only compass. And that's when they find it, the cave. What happened when they entered that cave? The miracle was only just beginning.
This is the moment where their sincere faith meets the infinite power of Allah. They are exhausted, both physically from their journey and emotionally from the pressure they have endured. They find a spacious area within the cave, and they sit down, placing their trust entirely on their Lord.
And it's here that they make that famous dua, isn't it? The one mentioned in the Quran?
Yes, and it's one of the most powerful supplications. The Quran tells us they said, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً وَهَيِّئْ لَنَا مِنْ أَمْرِنَا رَشَدًا. Our Lord, bestow on us mercy from yourself and facilitate for us in our affair a right way.
Facilitate for us in our affair a right way. It's a simple but profound request. They're not asking for the problem to be removed. They're asking for guidance through it.
Exactly. They are surrendering the outcome to Allah. And Allah responded to their sincere dua in a way that was beyond human imagination. Allah, by His infinite power, caused them to fall into a miraculous sleep. Not an ordinary rest, but a divine preservation. This is a divinely ordained slumber that would preserve them for ages.
And the Quran describes how Allah provided for their physical protection and comfort in amazing ways.
He did. First, the Quran mentions that Allah caused them to turn over to their right and left sides.
I've always been curious about that detail. Why is that important?
On a practical, human level, scholars explain that if a person remains in one position for a very long time, their body would deteriorate, or the earth would consume them. This turning, by the command of Allah, was a mercy, preserving their bodies as if they were merely sleeping for a night. It's a subtle sign of Allah's perfect care for the minutest details.
Subhanallah, so He was protecting their physical forms.
Yes, and secondly, the Quran tells us that the sun played a role. As it rose, it would incline away from their cave to the right, and as it set, it would incline away to the left, while they were in a vast space within it.
So the cave itself was positioned in such a way that the harsh rays of the sun wouldn't disturb them.
More than that, it was another miracle. The movement of the sun and the cave's entrance were orchestrated by Allah to provide them with gentle, life-sustaining warmth and light without the harm of direct exposure. They were in a state of perfect, peaceful equilibrium.
And what about Qatmir, the dog?
A beautiful detail. The Quran mentions the dog too, and describes him as stretching forth his forelegs at the entrance. He wasn't inside with them, he was at the mouth of the cave, acting as a loyal guard. His position there would have deterred any wild animals or a casual passerby from entering. If you saw a dog at a cave entrance, you'd likely assume someone was inside and move on.
So the dog was part of their divine protection, and his mention in the Quran elevates his status, showing us that even an animal, through its loyalty to the righteous, can attain a timeless honor.
Precisely. And so the scene is set. The young men are in a deep sleep, their bodies preserved, their space protected. The world outside the cave continues to turn. King Decius searches for them, fails, and eventually he and his entire era fade into history. Generations are born and die, empires rise and fall, and inside the cave, time stands still.
For 309 years.
By Allah's measure of time, in the blink of an eye for them, but an epoch for the world. And then the command comes from Allah to awaken them.
I can only imagine that moment of waking up, the confusion, the disorientation, their first thoughts.
Their first thought was the same as anyone's after a long sleep. They thought they had only slept a day or part of a day. The Quran captures this beautifully. They said to one another, "How long have you remained?" They said, "We have remained a day or part of a day."
They had no concept of the centuries that had passed, so what made them realize they needed to wake up and re-enter the world?
Hunger, the physical need for sustenance. They decided that one of them should take their old currency, silver coins from the time of King Decius, and go to the city to buy the purest, most discreet food he could find.
According to some narrations, that companion's name was Yamlicha?
Yes, and so one of the youths, Yamlicha, carefully leaves the cave and heads towards the city, his mind still in the past, completely unaware that he is about to step into a future he could never have imagined.
So, Yamlicha is walking towards the city, his pockets filled with ancient silver coins, his heart probably filled with a bit of anxiety, just trying to buy some bread. What happens when he gets there?
This is where the miracle shifts from the preservation of their bodies to the revelation of the truth to the world. Imagine Yamlicha's perspective. As he gets closer to the city, things might look different. The road is unfamiliar. The buildings have changed. But he presses on.
He must have thought he was lost, or maybe that the city had been rebuilt?
Exactly. But the real shock comes when he enters the marketplace. He tries to use his old coins to buy bread. He hands the silver coin to a baker, and the baker is utterly confused. He's never seen currency like this. He examines it closely and realizes it's ancient, centuries old.
So the baker thinks he's found a treasure hunter, or maybe a thief who's discovered an old hoard of coins.
That's the immediate assumption. The baker, and soon a crowd of people surround Yamlicha. Where did you get this treasure, they demand. They think he's found a lost king's treasury. But Yamlicha is just as confused. He insists, "This is just our normal money. I just left my companions in the cave yesterday. We are fleeing from King Decius."
And to the people in the market, that name Decius is ancient history. It's like someone today claiming they were hiding from Julius Caesar.
Precisely. The crowd is now bewildered. They take him to the city authorities, and eventually he is brought before the king himself. Now this is a crucial point. The king at this time, mentioned in our traditions as King Bedros or Theodosius, was a righteous, believing Christian king.
So we've gone from a tyrant who claims divinity to a king who believes in God.
A complete transformation of the society. Yamlicha, standing before this king, tells his incredible story. He speaks of his companions, their faith, their escape from persecution, and their sleep in the cave. The king, instead of dismissing him, is deeply intrigued. He gathers his advisors, including a wise elderly scholar.
And this is where the pieces start to come together.
Yes, the elderly scholar remembers an old, almost forgotten narrative passed down from his ancestors. A story about a group of pious youths who vanished during the reign of the tyrant Decius. The story was that they had fled to a cave and were under the protection of Allah. There was even a mention of a record.
What do you mean with a record?
A metal plate, made of lead or copper, upon which their entire story, their names, and the reason for their flight had been inscribed by a righteous man who had witnessed their escape and who had secretly placed it inside the cave with them.
Subhanallah, so there was physical evidence waiting to be discovered.
The king, realizing the monumental nature of this, immediately assembles a party including Yamlicha, the elders, and the townspeople, and they all march to the cave. But the king, in his wisdom, shows great respect.
What does he do?
He doesn't just rush in. He approaches with reverence. He sends word ahead, asking for permission to enter, honoring these righteous sleepers. And when they enter, they find the rest of the youths awake and waiting, and they discover the metal plate, confirming everything.
So their identities, their story, it's all verified right there. This isn't a legend, it's a confirmed, documented miracle.
And in that moment, King Theodosius understands the profound sign that Allah has shown them. He turns to his people and declares that this is undeniable proof from Allah, proof of the reality of the Day of Judgment, of the resurrection. If Allah can preserve these youth for centuries and then awaken them, then bringing people back to life after death is easy for him.
That gives me goosebumps. The entire purpose of their trial, their sleep, their awakening, it was to become a living proof for a generation that had forgotten the power of Allah.
And that's the divine wisdom. Their struggle wasn't in vain. Their faith didn't just save them, it became a source of guidance for an entire nation. It's a powerful lesson for us, that we never know how Allah will use our sincere struggles for a greater good we can't even imagine.
So the people of the cave have been discovered. They've fulfilled their purpose as a sign. What happens to them next? Do they just go on living in this new time?
That is the final poignant chapter of their story, and it holds one last beautiful lesson about the nature of this life. After the initial awe and celebration, a profound realization dawns on the youths. Their task was complete. They had been preserved as a sign for a generation that needed it, and now that the sign had been witnessed, their time in this world was, in a sense, complete.
They had achieved what they were brought back for.
Exactly. And so the narratives tell us that they did not seek to integrate into this new society. They had already passed the test of this world. Their hearts were no longer attached to it. Instead, they felt a sense of completion. And so they made one final collective dua to Allah.
What did they ask for?
They asked for what every believer ultimately yearns for: Allah's mercy and a peaceful, righteous return to Him. They prayed for death. The Quran doesn't explicitly state this, but the strongest scholarly opinion, based on historical narratives, is that Allah caused them to fall into a peaceful, final sleep. They passed away, their souls taken with mercy, their mission accomplished.
Subhanallah. So they didn't die of old age or sickness. Their souls were gently taken by Allah after they had fulfilled their incredible purpose.
Yes, and the king, King Theodosius, honoring them, built a mausoleum or a place of remembrance at the site of the cave, a testament to their faith for generations to come.
And what about their loyal companion, Qitmir? Is there any mention of him in this final scene?
While the texts don't specify, but the consistent opinion is that the dog, Qitmir, was with them until the very end. His story is intertwined with theirs. He was part of the miracle from the beginning, and he shared in their final peace. His name is forever immortalized in the Quran, a unique honor that teaches us about the value of loyalty and companionship in the path of righteousness.
That is incredibly moving. So the story ends not with a grand adventure and a new time, but with a quiet, dignified return to their creator. It really drives home the point that this entire life is a temporary journey, and our ultimate goal is to return to Allah with a pure heart.
You've hit on the central theme. The people of the cave are a living and And then passing example of the akhirah, the afterlife. Their story is a microcosm of the human journey. We live, we're tested, we die, and we will be resurrected. They experienced a mini resurrection that the whole world could see.
So when we recite Surah Al-Kahf every Friday, we're not just remembering a cool story, we're reminding ourselves of the core tenets of our faith: Tawheed, the struggle for faith, divine mercy, the reality of resurrection, and the fleeting nature of this world.
Precisely. It's a weekly spiritual compass recalibration in a world that often feels like Zacchaeus' kingdom, filled with modern idols of status, wealth, and distraction. This story calls us to prioritize faith, even when it means swimming against the current.
And that our sincere struggles, however small, are never wasted. Allah can magnify them in ways beyond our imagination, even across centuries.
That's the profound comfort. Your faithful act today could plant seeds of barakah, whose fruits you may never see, but Allah knows.
Now, for many modern listeners, this story raises a fundamental question. How do we reconcile such miracles with our scientific understanding?
And the Quran beautifully addresses this by redirecting us from speculative details to the core message. When people debated their numbers, Allah revealed, "Say, my Lord is most knowing of their number." The emphasis isn't on the how, but on the who, Allah, Al-Qadir, the all-powerful, for whom nothing is impossible.
So it's not science versus faith, but faith transcending science?
Exactly. When science itself shows time's relativity, affirming that the creator of these laws can suspend them becomes perfectly rational. This leads us to 3 timeless takeaways for our lives.
Which are?
First, courage of conviction, prioritizing faith over comfort, whether in wearing hijab, leaving unethical work, or praying openly. Second, power of righteous companionship, surrounding ourselves with those who pull us toward the cave of faith, not away from it. Third, divine trust, doing our part sincerely, then surrendering the outcome to Allah's perfect wisdom.
So this Friday, before you recite, pause. Let the story breathe in your heart, not as ancient history, but as Allah's living promise that He is with the faithful, that your journey matters, and that no act of true faith is ever lost.
May Allah make us among those who live this legacy.
Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.